All right, today's notes are going to be working with fractions again, and we're going to practice converting fractions, decimals, and percents. All right, so let's make sure you put today's date. In the right-hand corner or the top part of your notes, so you remember which day we started these notes. All right, so we're going to make a table in your notes. The first column will be fraction. Then decimal. And then percent. So let's say I gave you this fraction. Or let's say this was the quiz score you received in a history class or in your science class. You got 9 out of 16 points. If you want to figure out the percentage of your score, here are the steps you take. So if you're given the fraction and you want to turn it into a decimal, all you need is a calculator, and you're going to divide the numerator by the denominator. So in our example, we're going to take 9 divided by 16. So when I divide 9 divided by 16, I get 0.5625. So 9 divided by 16, that gave us 0.5625. So that turned that fraction into the decimal, just by dividing there. Now, to turn that decimal into a percent, you move the decimal 2 spaces to the right. And that's going to give you our percentage. So the decimal, remember, is this part right here. So we're going to move this 2 spaces to the right. So when I move that 2 spaces to the right, the new number I get is 56.25%. So I started with the fraction. I divided the numerator by the denominator to get the decimal. To turn that decimal into a percentage, I move it 2 spaces to the right, and there's my percent. So for any class that you're in, this is the steps you would follow to get the grade that you got on an assignment. We can also go in reverse. So we can start with a percentage and then turn that into a decimal. And then we can also go from the decimal into a fraction. So let's make another table. We've got fraction, decimal, percent. So let's say I gave you this percentage, 75%. We want to know what that is as a decimal and then what that looks like as a fraction. So if you have a percentage, now we're going to go to the left on this table. In a percentage, you're going to move the decimal point 2 spaces to the left. So remember, if you don't see the decimal point is going to be right after the last digit in your number. So in our example, the decimal point is going to be right here after the 75. So this time I'll move it 2 spaces to the left, so I count once and then twice. So my new number as a decimal is 0.75. So these things represent the same number, just in different forms. The decimal is the equivalent version of 75%. 0.75 is the version of the percentage. So now, when you're going from decimals to fractions, you have to read the number with place values. So remember, one digit after the decimal place is called your 10th spot. 2 digits after the decimal place is called your 100ths spot. So the way you officially read this number, you read as far to the right as you can go with the place value. So this is 75 hundredths. So if I'm writing that as a fraction, it's 75 over 100. And using what we learned earlier, we can simplify this fraction by dividing each of these by 25, because that's the greatest common factor for those numbers, and that turns into 3/4. So given a percent, you could turn it into a decimal and then turn it into a fraction. So it works going either way. So that's just our practice with converting between fractions, decimals, and percents, just as a kind of quick preview of what the numbers look like in rational form. All right, so you should be able to try the practice now with these problems.